Thanks for tuning in to DIY Projects with Pete, episode number 4. Today we're going to be taking some raw lumber just like this and transforming it into some beautiful and functional patio furniture that will look great on any deck. For tools, we're going to need an orbital sander, a drill, miter saw, sanding block, and a circular saw if you don't have a miter saw. For lumber, you're going to want to pick up a 2x6, some 2x4s, 1x4s, and 1x6s. In today's project, we used cedar. And lastly, pick up some deck screws, some drill bits, spar urethane, a paintbrush, and some sandpaper. For the free plans and complete list of instructions, tools, and supplies, head over to petesven.com/patio furniture chairs. All right, let's get started.
Hey there, welcome to DIY Projects with Pete, episode 4. I'm your host, Pete Sveen, out in Bozeman, Montana, and today I'm going to be showing you step-by-step instructions on how to build some patio furniture. So today what we're going to be building is a bench with a chair on each side and then a little table in the center. So if you're having a barbecue, you'll be able to have an extra spot for friends and family to sit, and then just another place to put some drinks and some hors d'oeuvres. Also, if you're maybe getting up to read the paper in the morning, you're going to be able to just relax, have a nice, comfortable place to sit, and then you'll be able to set your coffee on that table and maybe some of the sections of the paper that you're not reading. So we're going to build this table out of cedar. The reason I like building outdoor furniture with cedar is because it doesn't rot, and it also has a real nice look with just a natural finish on it. So we're going to finish it with a poly today. You could also build it out of pine. It's going to be a lot cheaper actually, but you're just going to want to make sure that you have a nice coat of paint on that to protect it from the outdoor elements. As far as difficulty, I'm going to say it's about a medium in difficulty, and that's just because we're going to be dealing with a few angles. Now, if you're a beginner, don't feel like you can't try this project. You're going to be able to do it. You just might run into a few more questions. And if you do, go ahead and visit my website, petesven.com, and I'll do my best to help you. As far as how long it's going to take, I'd say it's a good weekend project. You know, building it's probably going to be a solid afternoon, and then putting a poly or a paint on it is going to be another, few days just for the process of waiting and painting and that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and get started and enjoy. I hope you go out and build this yourself.
The first step is to review your plans, measure, and then cut. You'll see we're using a miter saw for the majority of the cuts today. Here we're just working on the 1x6s that will be used as the tabletop and the armrests. And when you do get to the angled cuts, we're going to use 15 degrees for every single angle today. So set your miter saw to that, pull down, and make your cut. After this, we're going to work on some of the notched openings for the front. So take those two 2x4s, measure up 9 inches from the bottom, and then make it so that it will fit those 2x6s that will span the front side of your project. Once those are completed, you can go ahead and make the cuts using a jigsaw. Now take your jigsaw and follow the lines that you just made to notch out for that 2x6 that's going to span across the front of the patio furniture. Once you've done this, go ahead and take a scrap piece of 2x6 and just make sure that it fits. Looks like it does, so we'll move on to the next step. Next, you'll want to round the corners for the armrests and for the top of the back supports using a jigsaw. And to get these rounded corners, just take a roll of tape, put it on the edge, and trace around it, then follow with your jigsaw. It's actually pretty simple, so just take that jigsaw and follow that line that you just made. These cuts can get kind of rough, so don't worry about that because you can take your orbital sander to smooth off the top and to clean up some of those edges and corners of your piece. I also like to sand all of the 1x6s that are going to be used as the armrests prior to actually assembling the table. Let's move on to the assembly. You'll notice we're framing up the outside ends for the chairs on this table. And before I ever put in any screws, I'm always putting a pilot hole in prior to doing it. That just eliminates the chance of the wood cracking or splitting. And I usually throw in 2 or 3 screws. I'm using 2.5-inch deck screws for this portion. All right, once you've done both of those, you can connect the two with that 2x6. We're going to take some more 2.5-inch screws and come in from the back side right there, and that's just so you don't see any screws on the front. Again, drill pilot holes prior to putting in those screws, and then go ahead and grab your drill and put in those 2.5-inch deck screws. I'd recommend throwing in 2 or 3 screws to attach that 2x6, And then if you want to hide those screws, you can countersink them just a little bit and then fill with putty in a later process. Now, once you've put in these and attached everything, go ahead and flip that back over, take a look at your work, and now we can flip it over one more time. We're going to attach the back support, which is a 2x4. This is probably one of the trickiest parts of the project. So the main thing you want to do is just make sure that this piece is parallel with the ground. So what I like to do is grab a tape measure, measure up 8 inches from that rear leg, and then grab a square and draw a line that's parallel to the floor and that's parallel to that end cut of the wood. Then grab that 2x4, trace around it, and that's going to give you the exact placement of where you need to line it up so that you can attach it to that end piece. So once you've done that, go ahead and drill your pilot holes and then put in 2 screws to attach that to the leg. Then you can move on to the other side and do the same thing. Now flip it over, admire your work, and then we'll attach the seat supports. We're going to start by attaching the seat support at the ends. So grab your 2x4, line it up flush with the top of that 2x6, and then you're going to want to rest it on the other side. Drill your pilot holes, and then finally put in a couple screws in each one, and use the 2.5-inch decking screws to go in here. Continue attaching the cross supports as shown in the plans, which can all be found for free at www.petesven.com/patio chair furniture. Go ahead and make sure that things are as level as they can be, and then go ahead and put in that last support. You'll notice this support, if you see right to the left of my shoulder, is actually put in upside down. I made a mistake, so I went ahead and fixed that later, but make sure that they are all pointed in the same direction. To attach the cross support to the back support, I'll drill a pilot hole through the cross support down at an angle in to the back support, and then I'll drive a 3-inch screw into that at that angle, and that's just going to help support this a little bit better, and then we'll do some more things to solidify it a little bit later. Now the cross supports should all be installed, and I did fix the one that I goofed up on, so we can move on and put the back rest supports. So go ahead and put that flush up against the top of the back support and then put in 2 or 3 screws to the side. And you'll see how we do this. You want to just grab that backrest support and line it up flush with that 2x4 cross support, and it's going to hang over that actual horizontal back support about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, and that's fine. So go ahead and put in 2 or 3 screws there. You'll want to do this for the 2 supports in the middle, and then you'll notice it's a little bit wobbly there, so what I do is I take another 3-inch deck screw and drill a pilot hole and then put it in at an angle to attach it to the horizontal cross support or back support. Moving on, we'll attach the 1x4 slats for both the seat and the backrest. Grab a tape and leave a 3/4 inch overhang for that front slat, which goes over that 2x6. Once you've done that, drill some pilot holes. Drill 2 pilot holes on each side, and then take 2-inch decking screws and screw that first slat into the cross supports and then into that 2x6 on this front piece. Then grab the rest of those slats, space them evenly apart. There should be 5 total, and they're going to be about 1/4 of an inch apart from each other. Just space them evenly. It's not a huge deal if they're off just a little bit. Now we get to repeat the process just a few more times. So continue drilling pilot holes, 2 on each side of the slat, and then follow up with a 2-inch decking screw on each side. Once those are all fastened, we get to move on to the back of the chair. And the first thing I like to do is grab the top slat, drill some pilot holes, and attach that. That way you can square everything up. And you want to space these evenly apart as well. After I put in the top slat, I typically put in the bottom one about 1/4 inch up, and then I place the remaining 3 slats as evenly as possible in the center. Now, after you've finished up with this left chair, you can move on to the other one and basically just repeat the process. So we'll go ahead and move on to that chair on the right and put in those slats. Like I said, you just evenly space them, and then make sure you drill those pilot holes again. and fasten those on, and then you can move on to the backrest. Put on that top rung again, and then after that top rung is done, you can do that bottom slat, and following the bottom slat, you get to replace or place all 3 remaining slats into the back. It's time to build that center table to hold those drinks and hors d'oeuvres. You can see that I worked on the front section just a little bit, but we'll walk you through doing the back, which is very, very similar. So grab the longer 1x4 sections that you cut for the table, flush them up with the bottom of that 2x4 that spans from left to right, and then drill some pilot holes and put in 3 of the 2-inch long decking screws to fasten those on. Just make sure they're standing straight up. And then once you get those 2 on, you'll be able to square them up just a bit with that 17-inch wide piece of 2x4 that spans the top of that. So we'll grab that 2x4, fasten that on from the inside. You can go ahead and use 2-inch decking screws for this as well. Now after you get this first 2x4 attached, we're actually going to add 1 additional 2x4 that is identical to that first one, 17 inches wide as well. And you'll want to attach this using 2.5-inch decking screws from the inside out. Now the reason we're attaching this extra 2x4 is just to help tie in the side chairs to the center to give it a little bit more support. So you'll see I'm taking 3-inch decking screws right now from the sides and putting those in at a slight angle into that center support. Now we get to attach the table and the armrests, so make sure that you have those rounded corners toward the outside for your table, and then put that one straight board right down the center. For the armrests, go ahead and make sure those rounded corners are facing outward as well, and they are 23 inches long, so have an inch overhang on the front, and then the back is going to line up flush with that 2x4 that's running underneath of it. Then space those center table boards out from each other as evenly as possible, and use 2-inch decking screws as well as the pilot holes before that to fasten those down to the frame. Once everything's assembled, I like to grab an orbital sander with some 120 grit sandpaper and hit as many of the surfaces as I can just to smooth everything out and remove any rough edges or places where you could get splinters. Then I like to fill in each screw hole with wood putty. So use your finger to push that in and to smooth it out, and then let it dry for an hour or 2. Once that's all dried, you can go ahead and hit it with an orbital sander again. Use about 120 grit, and just make sure you get off all that excess, because any of the excess that you don't get is going to look differently when you put on that poly or that stain. Now, if you paint it, you're not going to notice it, but if you're not going to paint it, just make sure that you get off as much putty as you can that's not in that hole. After sanding, you want to clean off the furniture as much as possible prior to finishing or painting. So if you have an air compressor tool, go ahead and use that. Otherwise, you can always use a broom. And then lastly, use a damp cloth just to wipe off the main surfaces prior to staining or painting. I'm going to finish our project today with a couple coats of spar urethane from Minwax. And the reason I like this product is because it's very durable and it maintains that natural look of the cedar. So grab a decent brush and begin applying that spar urethane to all of the surfaces. I generally do 2 coats, and after the last coat, you want to make sure that it completely dries, usually between 6 to 12 hours, depending on the conditions. Once that last coat is completely dry, I'll hit the top surfaces like the armrest, the tabletop, and the chair slats with about 220 grit sandpaper. Then I'll wipe it clean with a damp cloth and then apply one final very thin coat of poly just with a real clean lint-free cloth, and that's going to make this finish very smooth to the touch. And here's the finished product. Thanks so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions or would like complete plans, visit PeteSveen.com and find me on Facebook at facebook.com/DIY projects with Pete. Good luck on your next project, and cheers from Big Sky Country, Montana.